Welcome back to the Manager's Mic. I have with us a returning guest, Scott Trumpolt. Scott, even though you're a returning guest, in case someone is new to this show and hasn't had an opportunity like I've had to meet you, who
Hmm.
is Scott Trumpolt to them?
Well, first of all, Paul, I have to thank you for having me back on. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and your audience and the topics we've talked about in the past and what we're going to talk about today. But to your question, I'm a independent compensation planning and design consultant. And what that really boils down to is that I help companies figure out the best way to make a financial investment, not a financial advisor, but in essence, how to pay employees appropriately for the contributions they make in the organization. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. People think about base pay, and that's certainly very important, but there are also variable pay aspects that are incredibly important. For example, sales compensation. This is an area that I don't think gets as much attention out there than, say, base pay. And I think a lot of the rigor and the principles behind how you do base pay can be translated very effectively to the area of sales compensation. But for a lot of reasons, that's not really always done. And that's, I think, one of the topics that we're going to delve into today. So, yes, I've been doing this as an independent for about 14 years, working with all sorts of industries and companies. And before that, I was in the corporate world. So I've had the opportunity to develop sales compensation plan designs, both within a corporate setting for many years and also on my own. And I've made some observations along the way.
I also would like to put a plug in before we get into the hard further about the book you wrote, The Defragmented Consultant. I've been going through it, and as I shared before we hit record, a lot of the content from there has been catching my attention, part of your journey into where you've been. Would you like to speak to a little bit about if somebody's new to maybe the book you've just published on the Defragmented Consultant, what they would gain out of purchasing that book? Because I know I've gotten some value out of it. I wonder if you could speak to that and we'll go a little deeper into this content we have.
Sure. Well, thank you, Paul. It's been out since December. It's on Amazon and it's in all the different formats. I added hardcover not too long ago because I thought most people would like the e-copy or the paperback, but there are some hard copies that we're selling and of interest. I think the important thing to understand about the book is it is not a compensation analysis type of book, because I mentioned that I'm a compensation planning and design consultant. So it's not a book about that. I'm actually writing a book about that in a particular area as a follow-up right now. But the Defragmented Consultant is really a book to help encourage folks who want to get into independent consulting. I'm 14 years and counting, but I started to think that a lot of the books out there on this subject are kind of technically oriented. And I really wanted to get the message across that everything you've learned in the past, you need to bring forward, but you need to defragment. You need to make it run more efficiently, because ultimately you're going to most likely, as an independent consultant, be a force of one and you're going to have multiple clients. So how do you take your past and redefine it to make it more efficient so that you can meet these multiple client needs and have multiple revenue streams? So a lot of the book is about that and making that kind of transition. And so you really become this little individual corporation. So that's the theme of the book. To me, the greatest insecurity of all is being tied to one firm, and I was for a number of years, and knowing that, layoffs come, anything can happen.
Right.
Everybody is disposable in one way or the other. No matter what you think of your relative contribution, it's just a reality. This book is like giving a little nudge to those folks that have the skills that are valuable, and to redeploy them in a different way and to actually have more security in their life in the long run.
And I'll be putting a link to those who may want to check out the Defragmented Consultant into the show notes. So for those who want to leverage someone's expertise, been doing this 14 years and many years, making those tough transitions and make your career more bulletproof, please check out that link and click that. So Scott, I'm going to read to you a post on LinkedIn that caught your attention.
Mhm.
And this is going to be the anchor for our conversation today, for those who don't know. For those who don't follow me on LinkedIn or Scott, I recommend you do. But here was the post. So I'll read it from beginning.
Good.
What kills rapport with many sales teams? Not being clear on the commission structure since the math is the path, not having a clear value proposition that solves an acute pain, not having a sales playbook that is proven and refined in results, not having enough practice, not having fun. I put in parentheses the most important one. There are times when I had to be there for a brother or sister in arms when they faced an unexpected challenge, and it broke my heart to watch someone put on a brave face to best serve a prospect and do what was required rather than what felt good. And to the sales managers who navigate these team challenges, my hat is off to you too. If you have not been told thank you for all that you do, thank you for all that you do. Be well and have fun, Paul. Scott, you commented that we should do a podcast on this together, you and I.
Yeah.
What was it about this post, top of mind, that really resonated? And I'm privileged to have you back on the show and keep building our relationship. But I'm just curious from a having more rapport with you standpoint. What was it about that post, maybe one thing first, that stood with you, if I may?
I remember one particular experience where I was working with a company, and that company was not maximizing the sales potential of its employees. We had a new VP of human resources come in, and we started talking about the sales commission structure. It was a very detailed system that they had, and I'm not saying that the sales incentive system was bad. It did what it was supposed to do in terms of calculating the sales payments,
Hmm,
but everything about that system was complex. And worse than that, for the salesperson, they were spending so much time filing reports, meeting the requirements of the system. And actually, part of their incentive was based on making sure they filed this report and that report, which had nothing to do with actually maximizing the sales. And it was very
hmm,
complex and very confusing. And we fought quite a battle to simplify the sales compensation design and to get the plan participants much greater transparency, because the system, for all of its values, for all of its merits, it was very complicated way of calculating their sales incentive. And to me, that's the first step of all. You've got to make
hmm,
it simple. You've got to make it transparent. And from there, at the beginning of this call, I talked about how I saw that a lot of the rigor that went into making things transparent from a base pay perspective were not translating into a sales incentive that you can actually use the market to
hmm,
clearly and simply show sales plan participants that if you do this, this is what you will get. And the reason why you will get this is because this level of performance we value greatly. So if you do that, you are going to get the equivalent of 65th percentile above the market competitive rate. If you go
hmm,
even higher, you are going to get this level of the market. So at any time, an individual, a salesperson, can look at their simple plan, say it's a revenue generation plan. They have a revenue target, and they say, okay, and it's a quarterly pay. In the quarter, they can see right there, if I hit 110% of my target, I will get $6,000 payout. And that
hmm,
$6,000 payout is this percentage of the market. And you can briefly explain that the 50th percentile is, that means you're getting paid competitively. But if you
right.
do this, you're going to get paid at this percentile and the next percentile. And for every level of performance, both below and above, they can see from day one, before they even close the sale, how much they're going to get. And that's incredibly important for the
Hmm,
salesperson. They need transparency, they need simplicity, but they also need to know the transparency of why are they getting what they're getting. I've seen a lot of sales plans
yeah.
where literally at the end, they don't know what they're going to be getting. They know what they've been doing in sales until they get that. Oh, I got $4,000. Okay. And, but you've missed the opportunity because that's the end of the sales cycle. You have to set the
Right.
expectation of performance and what that individual get paid before they do a single sale. And so the reason why that letter that you put on LinkedIn resonated with me because I could see my frustrations. Needless to say, we changed that whole system. And eventually, the results, much better results, and a much better reaction from the sales plan people. But literally, they were having aspects of their plan that were designed to pay them out if they filed these reports on time that had nothing to do
Hmm.
with revenue generation. It got way too complex.
If I understood you correctly, they're doing stuff outside of their role. Number
Busy work,
one, busy
busy
work.
work
Yeah.
to support the system instead of the system supporting them. It's one thing if you want to have a system to calculate your sales payouts, that's fine. But to put all these layers of complexity where the individual salesperson does not know at any moment what they need to do. And that's good. If they know what they will get, they will do what they need to do. Because
Hmm.
salespeople, and I mean this as a compliment, very transaction oriented, very business oriented. They want to know if I do this, what do I get?
Yep.
And I think that gets lost in the shuffle. And I think the other thing that gets lost in the shuffle, the math is the path, and you can use the market to, a compensation consultant can come in and say, what's your ideal level of performance? All right, well, let's equate a certain level of market. If they hit 140%, and you say based on their targets, that would be difficult to achieve, guess what? We are going to pay that individual, if they do that, at the 90th percentile of market, meaning only 10% are getting paid more than that in the market. And that's
Right.
something that the salesperson can grab onto because they're getting a base pay to do already to do the little day-to-day things. But for the sales portion, it's very important that is completely linked to a market-based value that is linked to a
Hmm.
performance value that is achievable but
Yep.
takes a lot of the guesswork out.
I read a study 91% turnover is the typical average for salespeople.
Mhm.
And that's across all types of companies. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of data that plays into that. Do you feel, in your expertise, that factor of having a very unclear compensation plan that does not have those variables that you clearly discussed, Scott, is why that number is as high as it is across the country?
Based on my experience, yes, it's huge. I
Hmm.
have seen so many plans where it is just so complex that it's not that these salespeople are dumb or that any of these type of issues. It's just, it's taking away from what they really need to see
Right.
transparently to focus on. And I think they can even have a great manager because there was a shout out, a salute to the managers, the sales managers out there in that article. And I believe that sometimes it's a very intimate relationship, more so than other functional areas between the sales manager and his staff. They really have a connection, but the manager can only do so much. But if a manager can have input into what the target should be. You don't want me to be setting the targets for these individuals. You
Right.
want the business to be doing that, but you do want me or someone like me to help align the values, the amounts from a pay perspective, and to make sure that the plan also another point that's to answer your question, it's a big part. The other big part is the fact that there are different types of sales roles. There
Hmm.
is a manager who is managing a team and they're responsible for the overall results, but they are not doing individual sales, yet they're on an individual sales plan.
Hmm.
And there might be a component to their plan where they're paid based on the group results, but the reality is they are leading other people who are doing the sales, unless they actually have their own individual book of business. But I see that the plan does not always reflect the type of role. So when you're looking at a sales plan, it's not just it's about the role itself. What type of role is it? What is the typical fixed to variable pay mix for each type of job? To put it simply, how
Yeah.
much does each job you have in the sales department have on directly influencing revenue. Some
Mhm.
jobs are supporting the sales team, sales engineers, supporting them, providing them with the training and the analytical aspects. But they're not necessarily closing the sales, but they're part of the sales team. Then again, as I said, there's
Right.
the manager. The other reason why I think there can be high turnover is that the sales representative does not see a career path for
Mm.
them. They know that they're an intermediate level sales. Well, how do I get to become a senior sales
Yep.
representative? And how do I become an expert sales representative? Well, that's going to influence if you're a higher level salesperson, you should have a more difficult revenue target. Because again, you have more experience to penetrate larger types of accounts. So they don't see that pathway. And then the nice thing, if you have a career pathway, if you've got some expert salespeople and they want to become managers, by the time they're an expert as an individual contributor, that is going to be your bench strength to move them into a management role if that's what they want to do, because then they can apply all of their sales knowledge to helping
Mm.
others. I think sometimes people want to stay an individual contributor, and that's
Right.
fine. But I think in the sales area, it's a great way to develop bench strength by growing them into different roles. It's not just, okay, you're a sales representative. There are different levels of sales representatives. They should be paid differently based on their contribution, and their target should be set appropriately. Obviously, someone that has 10 years of sales experience and has worked with large accounts should get paid more, but the expectation should be higher for them
Right.
to close larger accounts, which means bigger revenue. And I think there's a disconnect there. People just say, this is where you were hired at. Now go out and sell. So I think career development opportunities are under. So it's those three things, but
Right.
they're all related that I think create that 91% turnover rate that you referenced.
When it comes to showing the math as the path, is it a skill issue? So let me give you a story to try to see if I can connect some dots. I got into sales kind of in a forced situation. My
Okay.
family was suffering, there was no money for college, made enough money, went back to college. I tried to for 4 years create a shortcut into training. And the manager, Paul Leon here. Thank you so much for being a consumer of the show. If you're a business owner who wants a free sales audit of your current sales process to evaluate possible gaps and you feel I can help you, please reach out to us directly off themanagersmic.com and we'll set up a free 30-minute consultation, no commitment at all, just to have a relationship further where we can speak in real time. Thank you so much for being a listener and watcher of the show. And now back to the episode. Said, if you're the number one salesperson, you'll be a trainer. So then I did that. He said, well, if you do it another year, then I did it another year. Well, if you do it 3 years, this happened for 4 years. In the fourth year, he goes, okay, you just don't have a degree. And then that was it. And he said, I wish I had just told you that 4 years ago. Now, part of the fault is on me for being ignorant, obviously, to what a good career path looks like. Here's my point, Scott.
Mhm.
Is there a type of roadmap for a new salesperson that should be expected? And if we were to write out that roadmap, just rough draft together, you and I, what would be like, here's how long you should be in this role, here's how long you should be in this role, and if you've been in this role too long, you should probably weigh your options, because I feel your expertise would be valuable on designing a roadmap for somebody new who does value the company but doesn't see the career opportunities for him
Right.
long term. I was wondering if you had some thoughts there or some insights.
Yeah. Often what I develop is a career architecture. And the great thing about career architecture or job classification is it's linked to realities in the marketplace. It does not stand on its own. So it is not completely subjective for a
Hmm.
career path. Here's the key point. Some people get a few years of experience and they're very comfortable staying at that level of contribution. Okay. There can be someone that has 10 years of sales experience, but they're kept in an intermediate level role because they seem to be able to close those type of accounts, those
Mm,
small accounts. And I think that when you create a career architecture for salespeople, you have to take an extra step. You
mm,
use the market. You say, look, we have 5 levels of sales representative in this company. Some of them may not be operating all at once, but we have an entry level, an intermediate, a senior, a specialist, and an expert. And within those career levels, there are certain expectations. A lot of
mm,
those expectations will have to do with how much autonomy you have to do in your daily work, the complexity of your accounts, and the revenue expectations need to be aligned because again, there needs to be a direct line that an employee as an entry level can see, okay, when I've got about 5 years of experience, really good experience, I should be at the senior level. And by being at the senior level, it's not because I have 5 years of experience alone, because we all
mm.
know people that have a couple of years of experience and are operating like they have 8 or 9 years of experience because of they have it. And then
Yeah.
other people are the slow but steadies. But ultimately, if you have 5 years of experience in sales, then you should meet all the criteria for a senior salesperson, which includes the fact that your targets are going to be set for someone with 5 years of experience. At 5 years
Right.
of experience, you should be well seasoned and you should have been brought along as part of this
Mm,
process where each year you're growing in terms of the type of accounts you're going after or the type of accounts that you're managing. That's another aspect to it. I don't want to deviate too much, but
okay.
within sales itself, it's not just about field sales. Some people are closing new sales. Some people are growing existing accounts. They're doing account management. Some people are on the business development end rather than the pure sales side. So that is a factor as well that goes into it. But getting back to the career level piece, there needs to be a clear career architecture. What are the requirements to be a senior level? And one of the biggest requirements that's going to distinguish between an entry and intermediate and senior that will resonate, hopefully, with the salesperson is that as you become more seasoned from a business need perspective, from a business need, we need you to go after these kind of accounts. You're ready for it. That generates this kind of revenue. And if in that process you were doing great as an intermediate level, but now you're not hitting your targets as a senior level, doesn't mean that you should be let go. It means that you might need to spend more time developing as a senior, and we might need to make adjustments. And then there's
Mm,
other people that will meet that ability in a couple of years and they'll move on to the next level. And as I said, well, what happens when they get to the top level? When they get to the top level, they're interacting with the highest level accounts. They're closing the highest level of accounts. This might be a person that can continue to make a lot of money on the variable pay side, or they can move over and become a manager of salespeople, or they might want to move from field sales into business development
yeah.
and to be on the other end of it. Because there are different paths even within sales. So I think that needs to be part of the discussion as well. It's not just
Mm,
about the levels, because sometimes in order to go up, you need to go sideways. Because
yeah.
obviously, from a
Mm,
company, you're going to increase your value dramatically if you know how to do sales, account management, and business development, which are variations. Some people really are good at finding the accounts to get other people to close. When you demonstrate those type of skills, you increase your value to the company. So
mm,
that's got to be part of the equation. So if you're asking me from
right.
career architecture, I'm talking about levels, complexity
Yeah.
of accounts, and the type of, are you an individual contributor or a people leader? And you're you're growing. And you mentioned training as a
Yeah.
trainer,
Yeah.
sales training, incredibly important in the corporate world. That's another sideline. What was missing perhaps from that equation is where do you go beyond sales training? Do you become
Yeah.
not a sales trainer, but you become a director of the sales trainers? Do you want to then go back into applying your training at a higher level? So that there's got to be these pathways, and they're not complex to put together. So if I was coming in, that's what I would do. It would
Hmm.
also, of course, have to be linked into the business need, because the business might turn around and say to me, Scott, we're never going to need a senior level person to do this. But
Hmm.
they may say, yes, we want to have all these intermediate level of sales representatives. I had a client like this. What they
Really?
valued was someone that could be slotted in, do business
Hmm.
development part of the time, do field sales, do account management. And there's slightly different skill sets involved and characteristics for all of those. So you have to make it fit the business need. And that's the other piece that's incredibly important about being an independent consultant, is to listen and to not give them a forced off the shelf type of solution.
Yeah.
It'll die. And that's the last thing you want, because that hurts your career. And it's a
Hmm.
waste of money, and it's a waste of time and effort on everybody's part. So the first thing you got to understand is the business model, because the business model is going to dictate what that looks like. But everybody has different needs. I've worked with very small companies, a few stores, locations, and I've worked with very large ones that have quite a developed hierarchy. But different business needs have different requirements.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. It felt earlier when your dialogue, when you were talking about business development, field representatives, and how those are distinguishable. I think a big pain point is not getting your definitions right. I have
Hmm.
seen companies personally who group the term business development and field representative as the same types of job
Yes, yes,
responsibilities. And
all the
I
time.
feel, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like, these are two very different descriptions
Yes.
entirely. So it's very fascinating that I like that you made that distinction. I know for me personally, when I got into sales and I had just did commission only, I struggled and it always felt like the compensation plan was the last thing we talked about, almost
Hmm.
as if it was like this voodoo type thing, like don't
Yeah.
touch it. And I remember I was doing a consulting gig and I said in sales training, you should always start with how to collect the money. When it's technical training, you train front to back. When it's sales training, you should train back to front because they need to know what they're going to get paid and how to
Yep.
collect the money. And the business owner said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, like to my face.
Hmm.
And I was like, I don't think this is going to work. That's like, I didn't want this to come out of my mouth, Scott. I want to be very transparent. But as soon as
Hmm.
he said that, I was like, this is never going to work. And unfortunately, I had to close the chapter on that opportunity because I don't feel like if a business owner doesn't value clarity and compensation as the priority and makes that top priority, they don't want to be in business. That's just my opinion. That's real
Hmm.
talk for
Yeah.
me. I'm curious about if you've had a similar experience on a high level, like, hey, 20 years ago this happened and this is the result. And you don't have to name names, but I'm just curious if you had something from your arsenal of consulting or experiences that kind of support that type of story or maybe contradict it as well. Like, well, actually, Paul, there's this version you're not thinking of. And I invite you to challenge me.
Well, as far as the first part, when you started off, you were talking about something very important, which was that business development and sales are two different things. And I have seen many cases where they will send me a job and they'll call it sales manager. And then I look at it and I say, this is business development. And they'll kind of go like, oh, yeah, well, and I said, no, it's not. Oh, yeah, yeah, well, there is a
Yeah,
totally different market value for this job, and the pay mix is different. But business development, they're out there, they're hunting, they're sourcing different opportunities for the pipeline to bring it into the sales workforce. They're paid more on the base. And they may, on the variable side, they may wait because they're in a longer sales cycle. The sales cycle is very crucial as well to
right.
determining the motivational levels. If a job closes sales very quickly, they're getting paid a very low commission. you're going to want to make sure to reinforce with more regular variable payments, monthly,
Mm.
that type of thing. Sometimes even weekly. It depends. Other ones where the sales cycle is a lot much longer, it doesn't make sense to do that because they need that time to close. So I got off on a little tangent there, but
Yeah, you could.
that example of what you're talking about is very true. As to the second part, I haven't, it depends upon the way that it's phrased, but what you were saying was correct. Sales, we need to motivate the sales workforce. And I don't see how you can do that by keeping the sales part, what they're going to get paid at the very end. Because there are clients, for one reason or another, that may not even finalize the plan till after the quarter is done.
Wow.
Which to me is like, well, how do they know what they're going to get?
Yeah.
And well, it takes time to budget and all of these. I said, well, then you should have started in the summer to get it ready
Yeah.
for it because, and that's the kind of things that I find myself helping out with because what I recommend is literally giving the employee a spreadsheet, very simple template, which has already got all the calculations done in it in the back. So
Yeah.
all they do is it's a sheet set up for them and they put in their performance level. There's a drop down box. Okay, did you achieve, you achieved 63%. Well, guess what? That's less than the threshold of 80% performance. So you get nothing. End of story. They can see that
Yeah.
up front. It's not
Yep.
pretty, but they can see that up front. Oh, you've got 98% of target. All they do is select 98% of target and everything just prints out, say it's a revenue generated target, and we could get into a whole discussion about how many targets to have or how few,
Yeah.
but it literally says to them, if you do this, you get a payment of $6,000 this quarter, and they can factor that into their thinking up front. Well, people will say, well, then they can go after certain accounts and manipulate that and everything, but it's revenue. It depends how the plan is structured. You can do little things like not just going after revenue, but it's got to be profitable revenue and put a little bit more complexity into it. But the biggest thing I see, and here's the good news, there's a general trend out there in the compensation world to be more transparent. There are different laws in states that certain laws require to post pay ranges for jobs.
Yeah.
And while
I've
that
seen
is
that.
not happening so much, they're not saying, you got to post the sales commission and everything because that's very confidential information to the business and other businesses. But the point is that this general culture, there are different forces that are and newer generations that are asking for greater transparency. And if you're
Mm.
going to be transparent with sales folks, you're going to have to be more upfront. So I think there is a changing dynamic towards greater transparency that will benefit this process that we've been talking about going forward. I can say that the when you see these top 100 companies to work for, they're very much into providing as much transparency while still protecting the company, but providing greater transparency. And they do have satisfied sales forces. So those sales forces have to have some accessibility and transparency to a plan that's simple to understand and to execute on.
Do I have your permission to play devil's advocate a little?
Sure.
I'm curious though about a listener who might be listening who hears about a Fortune 100 company and they may give the objection of, well, yeah, but they're more established. And I'll give you another story to help give you some launching off point. I remember I was speaking with a small business owner who could not hire a salesperson. He just couldn't do it. He said, I can't get it. I can't get it done. And I said, what do you think is your biggest challenge? And he said to me, it takes a special person to just work off commission. And I haven't found that special person. I feel that's a bad way of thinking. I think it creates a mindset of excuses. What are your thoughts on that story? Like, if we could wave a magic wand together, Scott, and you could have interjected in that conversation, what would have been your, well, that's not true because of XYZ to that small business owner who doesn't have all those resources, like a Fortune 100 company has been doing it for decades? I'm curious your perspective there.
Well, again, this individual, I don't know. Again, you mentioned that it's a small company, but I have worked with small companies, quite small, that
Hmm.
do have some of their sales force strictly on commission. And I've had to look, and they had 6 or 7 people on this.
Oh,
And
really?
although those people are strictly on commission, they were making like $90,000 a year. I
Hmm.
don't know how to quite respond to that, that you can't
Oh, you're
find,
fine.
there are people working strictly in that capacity. So I'm not sure. I mean, it's something maybe he can't for some reason. I wouldn't want it. The only thing I would think of is that, okay, you're paying them strictly on commission. What's the commission rate? So
Hmm.
I would be asking more questions. Is it that,
Yeah, I didn't
okay,
ask that.
you're working only on commission? Well, what are you offering them? What is the potential? And
Hmm.
without knowing that, I because if it's a lousy commission plan, maybe that's the reason. And by
That's
Fortune 100, I shouldn't have said Fortune 100. What I meant was best
yeah. I'm with you.
100 companies to work for, which may or not be the biggest companies out there. They just happen to earn that designation. But to get back to this question, I could
Sure.
only answer that by looking, and I have seen some commission plans. And when I compare them to what those people would get in the market, because it's very much a total cash scenario. I understand they're only on commission, but when I'm in the marketplace, I'm looking at what they should be getting in total cash compensation.
Right.
So if they're on commission only, and the market says for their role they should make total cash of 100,000 at target performance, average, standard performance. That's good, you know?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
what's the upside? But if the the performance for the job that he can't hire from would pay at target 40,000, then he's got a problem hiring someone,
Hmm.
anybody. So I need to
That's
see the
fair.
numbers.
You need to see the numbers.
Yeah.
I have two more questions.
I mean, that's the only thing I can think of, is that the commission is not
Yeah.
attractive.
He didn't do his math. The math, there is no path. He didn't do his
He
math.
might have, and then that's another discussion, but I don't know that for certain.
No, that's fine. I'm curious. So I've heard a lot for years the rhetoric that thank goodness that I'm in sales or you can be in sales because you can make as much money as you possibly can think of.
Mhm.
And as someone who has knocked on doors and knows there's a little, I feel there's a little fallacy in that if I'm adding my own personal perspective. But
Mhm.
when and assuming you've heard that too in some circles,
Yeah.
more or less.
And I have an answer for that too.
And that's what I'm asking you. What is your response to that? Do you feel that that statement holds water, or that that's just simply not true? I'm curious from an independent consultant who works in compensations perspective on that statement
Yeah.
when it's spoken.
Well, here's the answer. A good compensation plan works for the employee, but it also works for the company.
Mm,
And this is what I recommend to clients. And sometimes they don't like it and sometimes they do. But here's my recommendation. What I tend to do is, again, by being very transparent, I will show the employee and the company, so the company knows at all times, if the company hits this performance target level, top performance, we are going to pay at the 90th percentile of market. Okay. 90th percentile. When the employee hits that level, we are going to reduce the amount of commission that they earn because they are at their top. And so it's a two-part question. I'll get to the second part, but
you're good.
when we hit that performance level consistently, we're paying them. We can say, turn around to the employee, we're paying you at the top percentile of market. And after that, you can continue to make more, but it's going to be dramatically reduced because you are at your top market value. And the next
Mm,
question, they will say, yeah, but I'm doing great and everything. I said, you shouldn't cap my earnings. And some companies feel like that. I don't want any caps, no caps.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason I say that also, not only is the employee now making at the top market level, They can still make more, but it's going to be now that because from standard performance all the way up to top performance, they're getting big increases for each level of performance
Yeah.
to match the market. But the reason I like to put a cap on that, in a sense, a cap, again, they can get paid linearly after that point,
Yeah.
is that there might be something wrong with the target setting. If they are hitting 400 or 500% of their target, there might be something wrong with the targets. They're too easy to achieve. And so this
Mm.
is a way for the company to make a decision if that person goes above to have an examination. If they find that it's all legit and the targets were set right, they
Yeah.
can make a decision to pay out at a greater level. They can
Yeah.
also put in a provision to say anything above this level of performance, like considered a windfall type of
Yeah.
situation, we're going to evaluate it. But that's why I say that there is a cap in the sense that when we're paying at the 90th percentile, it should slow down, not completely, but it should slow down after that point because we've been transparent with the employee. You're paid at the top level of market for your role, because it may also be not only a case of their target setting, but it may be the case of a senior level employee getting
Right.
a target of an intermediate or an entry level employee. And we need time to sort this out. So I think there are limits to answer your question.
That's fair. Is there anything, Scott, that we did not talk about that we should have talked about in this conversation today?
I think we touched on all of the points. I think one of the most important things to take away from this conversation is that while there are a lot of factors like we went through, the type of the role, the payout frequency, the level of the salesperson, the targets, all of these different things. That's all in the background that's worked out. The employee themselves, we need to be transparent, keep the number of measurements simple and things that are achievable in their minds that support the company business mission, and to make it transparent at the beginning of the process, not at the end of the process.